Okay, as we start this final piece of this week 1 lecture, we're going to look at a second very important part and something we're going to use every single week throughout the rest of the semester. We're going to create a blank template of a payroll register, and then that's something you can use. If I don't give you one, you can use your own blank template that we're making this week instead of recreating a new template every single week. Save this one as an original, and then we'll go through and add in our employees each week and see what's different and then make our journal entries and do everything on our payroll register. All right, so when we're making a payroll register, we're going to use Excel. And the first thing we want to do is we're going to have our first 2 columns at the top left of the Excel sheet, and I'll bring it up here in a second, is the employee name, and then we're going to have a second column that's going to show the employee's marital status and their allowances. This will be helpful. A lot of the things that we're doing in making this generic template is going to help us as we get further into the class. So right now we haven't learned anything about this, but when we get to week 4, this is going to help that we already have this embedded into our template. All right, so our first item, when you have your blank spreadsheet up, just need to move this out. Oh, come on. Sorry about this. Okay, here we go. Okay, so when you're setting up your Excel sheet, you're going to have your name column, and then usually we'll have 3 or 4 or so employees on per example basis. So you may want to put your total down a couple of lines, and then you'll put a total column here. Our next column will be our marital status and our allowances. And then feel free to always pause this video if you get behind. Not a problem. All right, and then we're going to make 4 categories. I have all 4 here, yeah. We're going to make 4 categories, 4 columns, and this is going to list our prior wages. And as we'll see as we get further into the class, just because I had previously made $1,000 in gross wage doesn't necessarily mean I had $1,000 in taxable wages for federal, Social Security, or Medicare. So we're going to have 4 different columns, and for right now, if we were doing these, they would all be the same. We haven't talked about any differences. So if I had 1,000, it would be 1,000 all the way across for employee 1. But later on in the semester, that won't be the case. There's no need to go ahead and total these prior wages. You can if you want, but we will total our columns as we move on, continue to go. So our next item, so we just did step 3. We made a prior gross wage, all these wage columns. We're now going to do the exact same thing, but for current wages. So I would skip a column, and then we're going to make our gross wages, current federal taxable wages, Social Security, and Medicare wages. And that's where, so this is where I would have put, I think I said 1,000 before, but let's remember on one of our examples, our prior wages was 6,700. That's where this 6,700 would have gone. I protected this sheet so it can't be modified, but that's where that 6,700 would have gone. And the 1,000, how much we made this time, would have went here. And then later on, we'll see how it could be different for these categories. Okay, so now we've got our first, all these columns up through K. Now we're ready to start making columns for each payroll tax. So every item that was in our journal, we need to make a column the same. So let's do them in the same order. We make a column for Social Security tax, Medicare tax, federal withholdings, And then remember the last two, state and county withholdings. And then I put these in here. We haven't had any like this yet, extra withholdings, but we had talked about how they could be there. So I'm going to go ahead and leave room for them and even put them in as my template, things that I could possibly pay. And then if you needed to add more, if you only put in 3 like this, but in future examples, there's another 1 or 2, you can easily just add a new column. Just right click and then insert a new column. And then a very important line here is our final net pay. As you're going through these, what I would do on your template, and I failed to mention this before, but let's go ahead and start putting in our total columns. And I would make it just like how I have here. Up here at the top, you can see, well, I can't even highlight it. But I put the sum, or you can just put add all the columns, or you can put in this formula. I'm basically adding up H2, H3, and H4. And then the same, I'm going to go, and I'm going to click on this little green thing, little green square, move it over all 4 to the 4th column here to K. And then that's going to make the Excel program add up these columns, and then finally K. I'm going to do that for my Social Security, but first what I'm going to do is put in a basic formula for Social Security. So I don't have to recalculate it every single time anymore. If I use this template, as soon as I put in an amount for current taxable wages, say I put in 1,000 here, it's going to know to take whatever's in this cell and times it by 6.2%. So all I've got to do is enter in the wages. It's going to, with my payroll template correctly set up, I'm going to then have my Social Security tax already done for me. Each and every time I won't have to recalculate it. The same with Medicare. Well, let's make sure we come down. So we do J2, that was this one, and then here is J3, here's J4. Do the same thing with Medicare. Take our Medicare wages, whatever they are, in that cell and times it by our Medicare rate, 1.45. I will have a copy of this lecture register out there for you to view, for you to see as well, if you would like. But it's not one, as you can see, you can't type in it, so you just can't use my Excel. You're going to have to make your own. That's why I made it like this. It's password protected, but you can at least see, you can click on it and see what the formulas are. So I do the same for the state. The state is always the same rate. It's always the 3.23. The federal will change, so that's why I have these blank. I'm going to have to manually go in and do those. And then finally, when I get to net pay, look at the formula I did. I took my gross pay, H2, total payment that was earned, and then I'm subtracting all of these deductions. Subtracting the sum of all of those deductions to get my net pay. So my net pay is going to calculate every single time. As soon as I start putting in the figures, my net pay is going to automatically update. I don't need to recalculate it and have a possible math error every time I do payroll. Now, out here are the employer extra taxes. And I want to keep track of these as well. And that's what this bullet point number 7 is. So I tell us, go ahead and skip a column because this starts the employer items. And just like how we had before when we were getting the employee pay, we had our prior wages and our current wages. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to have prior FUTA and SUTA wages, and then how much of our current wages are actually taxed. These prior wages are going to help us know, have I hit the cap? And so if I see a 7,000 over here, say for employee 1, they've made 7,000, I'll know that my current wages would be 0 because they've hit the cap. And then my final two columns is how much tax is actually taken out, or how much tax is actually paid by the employer. The FUTA tax doesn't change. So I can actually go ahead and set up a formula for it and say take y2 times by 0.006. And then finally, I can do the same thing for the SUTA rate as long as I have a cell to put in the SUTA rate. Let's say the percentage is 3.5%. If I type in 3.5% here, then it's going to take my Z, my current SUTA wages, times by this 3.5%, and then it's going to calculate that for me as well. And that'll become in handy when I'm ready to do my journal entry. So now the time for the journal entry. I always put these, skip down a couple rows, say to row 8 perhaps. And we're going to start putting in our journal entry, what we just did in the previous video. So everything that when you do a journal entry, I want everything to correspond with a previous calculated cell. So when you put wage expense, you're gonna hit equals here, and then always link that to your current pay for all the employees. Because when you do a journal entry, it isn't by employee. You don't do one for employee 1 and then 2 and then 3. You do it for the entire company at one time. So we do wage expense, and we would just do this column, this total column. And then we're going to start saying, okay, how much Social Security taxes did we take out in total for the employees? And that's going to be this guy. So we're going to automatically put in this formula. So when I'm ready to start putting in numbers, it's going to autofill as soon as I start typing in numbers up here in our wages. Then these guys populate, and then that populates my journal entry. So it's all done for us if you just set it up right the very first time. So we're going to do the same for each of these. We're going to put equals and then the total amount cell, all the way down to my final payment. This number better match what my net pay is. And then the payroll tax expense, we don't know what it is to start out with, so that's why it's always 0. It's simply adding up all of these. And then Social Security, we're going to attach that up where it goes. Medicare, FUTA, and SUTA, we're going to attach our FUTA and SUTA to these guys over here, our new columns that we just created. And that is setting up your payroll register. What I would do as you are saving this, save this as your template. And then you're going to come back and open this up every time we do a payroll register problem, if I don't give you a template already. So save this and then reopen it up. And what I want you to do is to begin to fill in this payroll register. And it actually should be pretty easy. It shouldn't take you too long if you have all. The hardest part is setting everything up in advance, like we just did. Once you have that, everything should autofill for you quite easily if you set it up right. All right, so what I want you to do is pause the video and insert all of the numbers here, and then we're going to check the answers and see how you did, see how your payroll register looks. So go ahead and pause now, and then we'll go through the answers. All right, so if you're hearing this now, you should have your payroll register complete, and let's look at your answers. I'm pulling up the answers right now. Oh, that's the wrong one. And here we go, answers to our lecture number 3. Okay, so let's work through these. Hopefully your wages look like this. This is just simply copying what I have, the 8,000, 6,400, and 5,400. We don't have any difference in any of these columns because we haven't talked about any of that yet. The same is going to be for our current wages. Whatever they currently make, that's going to be what's taxable as well for right now. So I tell us the $2,000, $1,600, and $1,350. And then this, I simply tell you how much is being withheld. I don't even make you do a percentage. Here are the couple percentages that I do have to give you that you will want to input as we're doing our template. So if you put in everything correctly, these are the amounts and the final totals that you should have for each category. So take a minute to look at those. Pause at this point if you need to. Your net pay should have been the $38.77.19, give or take a penny or two for rounding. Notice what I did for the county. I went ahead and I made a box for the 1.5% so then I could always reference that box. You don't have to do that. You can simply put in the 1.5% since that's something I have to give you. Whereas over here, the amounts are always the same, and that's 1.45 should be in your template. We come over to the FUTA and SUTA wages. All right, so our prior wages. Notice I stopped it at $7,000 for this employee, even though he's made $8,000. For employee 1, the most you can have is $7,000, so that's where it stops. But for SUTA, you can go all the way up to $9,500. All right, so when I look at employee 1, how much wages are taxed? There's none. We've already hit the cap for FUTA. And then for SUTA, we go through the steps. If I took $8,000 and I added in the $2,000 that he made this time, that brings me to $10,000. That's over the cap. So then I do step 2. $9,500 is the cap minus the $8,000 where we're at right now before this pay, and there's only $1,500 left. So then I put in the SUTA rate, and at that point the Excel should calculate it for me. If I set it up correctly, the $1,500 times my rate gives me $3,750. In this column, of course, being 0. Now, when we get to employee number 2, our prior wages are as is. Nobody's hit the cap. However, for FUTA, we will hit the cap, this pay, because we have earned $1,600. If I take $6,400 plus $1,600, that takes me over the cap. So therefore, I take step 2, the cap minus where I'm at currently, $6,400, $600 left to be taxed. The $600 times my FUTA rate gives me my tax here. And then notice my SUTA, I didn't go over the cap. If I take $6,400 plus $1,600, that brings me to $8,000. That's not over $9,500, so the full amount is taxed. And then this guy, everything is taxed. We haven't hit the cap, and we still won't hit the cap even after this pay. So his full wages are taxable in full. And then we get our formula, taking this cell, the Y4 times the 0.006. And then these numbers are going to go into my journal entry as well. And they should be linked there already. So the final piece now is to fill out hopefully this should already be filled out for you if you set it up correctly. The $49.50 being here, the $306.90 being here, and then all of the rest of these being on over in my payroll register totals. This matching my net pay. My payroll tax expense is calculated to add up all of these, even though it's currently not. I haven't set up this formula correctly. I'll do this after the video, but just note that this one is incorrect. This should be all four of these added, which is 501.63. So ignore this number. I'll change it in the answers that I put out there. But this should be 501.63, not 378. I have it just adding up these two for whatever reason. And then finally, I tell us to go ahead and pay the Social Security, Medicare, and federal income tax. And if we would have done the T accounts, I just made some basic T accounts over here. Just a couple that I picked out, the ones that we needed, to show how much do I owe. So 306.90 for the employee and 306.90 for the employer is 613.80. Do the same for the Medicare and the federal, and we have a paycheck or a taxes due for $1,217.35. All right, with that, we will close out this first week session, and this may be one of our most important weeks. I hope you got a lot out of it, and I will see you for Module 2.